alternativa. Quem tomaria parte do
Homens e mulheres conscientes!
Houve uma... This would be excellent.
Homens e mulheres conscientes!
This is very and this makes sense.
Todos bem-vindos. Para nós é uma grande alegria estar aqui, recebendo vocês aqui.
Well, my name is Trindade. To us, it's we are very happy to receive you and at our humble community here, and feel like you were at home. He has the flu, as everybody else it seems here in Brazil at this time of the year. Okay. So he will talk first about the difference between invasion and occupation. He wants to explain that although the media talks many times that the MST invades, they don't make invasions, they make occupations. To occupy means to occupy a certain area that does not fulfill its social function. The Brazilian Constitution says in the land reform chapter that every piece of land has a social aim, a social purpose, that is to produce goods, produce food, in order that to furnish foods and elements to the people. So they occupy areas that do not fulfill this constitutional determination, so they don't feel like committing a crime. Supreme Court decisions that recognize that an occupation of such kind of land that does not fulfill its social function is a legitimate means of pressure in order that the government speeds the land reform process. So that for this they feel that an invasion really is a crime, because when you invade, you are invading a property or a building or something to take a personal advantage, to rob. That's invasion. To occupy is to press government in order that they also fulfill their constitutional obligations. The name of this camp is Sister Alberta, Irmã Alberta. Sister Alberta is a nun that has dedicated her life to organize people of the MST. She belongs to the Human Rights Committee of the MST, and so to give her name to this camp is a way of making a just homenagem to a real to a real warrior of the human rights cause. The movement of the rural workers without land, that's Movimento dos Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra, the MST, was created in 1980, but it was only, let's say, had an official recognition and an official organization in 1984 in the city of Cascavel in the state of Paraná.
Nós somos um movimento social, autônomo, de massas, de caráter sindical, popular e político.
We are an autonomous social movement. We are a mass movement. We are a sort of a union movement in order to organize our people. We are the inheritors of the struggles of the past. The struggle on the Canudos that I told you in the bus, the struggle of the Indians towards the aim of defending their land from the occupation, from the invasion, really. And we do not aim at having any personal richness, but our aim is to organize people so that they can get, let's say, a decent way of living. So the MST has already reached to settle more than 300,000 families in Brazil. These were families that lived in slums, that they starved, they were the object of narco traffickants, and they had all sorts of hazardous conditions of life in many cities in Brazil. And now in these settlements, many times they are already disputing a new relation, a new market relation with these towns, with their production. We think that human beings are able, every human being is able to understand and to support human values. So we try to bring these fellow men, these fellow women to our camp in order that they will not be, let's say, they will not take some other way, the way of killing, the way of robbing, and the way of being imprisoned. We think that killing, robbing is no way to no one, and not even the imprisonment is a way to anyone. So we try to get them, these people here, if they have any problem in their behavior, we try to correct them, we try to discuss with them, we try to put them in the right way in order to achieve a more decent way of life. Due to our organization, we have achieved many goals, we have had many victories, but we have also experienced many defeats. There is still much violence in the rural areas of Brazil. There has been many massacres of workers, like the massacre in El Dorado, in the state of Pará up north, some years ago, or the massacre at Corumbiara, also in another region. And this proves that if the Brazilian constitution is a democratic constitution, democracy is not achieved everywhere in the country. There has been rural workers and peasants that have been massacred by the police, the military police, and sometimes by armed gunmen hired by the great landowners. And so in some regions we still live a situation as absurd as that. Our goal is to preserve the human beings, to preserve nature, and to preserve the planet. So we don't use any means that endanger either the human beings, the nature, the environment, and the planet. We refuse to use, for instance, such instruments that were used in the past, like burning fields in order to plant after, that they are no good for the planting, or we refuse to use the transgenic or modified or genetically modified seeds and other things that may be endanger the natural life in our planet. Our aim is, he repeated, to get a better way of living for every human being and the environment. The MST will exist as far as there will be hunger, as far as there will be poverty and misery in our land. Our aim is to bring these people that are in the slums, that are subject to violence in many cities and towns in Brazil, in order that they can foster their situation into something more, let's say, dignifying to the human being. Our aim is, at the end, to really fulfill the aims of the Brazilian constitution.
Okay.
Has a historical debt towards its working class. The land reform is a part, or a way of also paying this historical debt towards these people. President Lula promised during his campaign that he would settle 400,000 families during his government, and we believe that really he wants to do that, and that he will do that in order to fulfill the aims of our constitution. One of the great problems of Brazilian society is centered around agribusiness. In the ways that agribusiness is being fostered in this country, this augments poverty, misery, and it makes more difficult to achieve a real land reform to the Brazilian people. One of the problems, let's say, what makes the land reform difficult is that you find in every instance of power in Brazil, on the courts, on the executive, on the chambers, you always find some people, some sectors that are not interested in land reform and that favor they favor completely only agribusiness. In Brazil there is, for instance, the UDR, it's the União Democrática dos Ruralistas, the Ruralists Democratic Union, that in fact is a very, very conservative movement that organizes the landowners against the land reform. You'll find also in courts many judges and many promotores, how do you say, many prosecutors that are very conservative, and they make life very difficult to the MST and other peasant workers, and they favor only the great landowners. And well, that's the judge, the general judge. It's the high judges in the high courts, the desembargadores.
Trindade, você poderia falar um pouco da sua história para a gente entender como chegou? I'm asking him to tell a little bit about his story, his personal story, his background, in order to enlighten.
I am from Euclides da Cunha. It's a city in Bahia, in northern Bahia, and my grandparents were peasants, but they, for some reasons, they lost their land, and so we were forced to come to São Paulo. Well, I came to São Paulo, and in the beginning it was, I had a very difficult life, a very problematic life, because I stayed much time unemployed, and I lived in the streets. I was homeless, and I wandered in the streets, and then 3 years ago I met the MST people. That was really something important, because I found real friends. They dialogued with me, they looked at me as a human being, and not only as an object of any system. And so I came here, and here, as you see, I have a difficult condition of life, but I consider it a decent way of living.
Para vocês entenderem,
You'll see, we have had here in Brazil three great major systems of production. In all of them, the poor were excluded. The peasants were excluded. There were no benefits for them. And one of the great problems here in our country is that the rich people, they still appropriate everything, and the poor can have nothing to their lives. The first model was that brought by the Portuguese when they destroyed the native communities, they destroyed their values, their way of living, and they started an exportation system that exported goods to Europe, and that brought no benefit to the native population. Only they were only enslaved by this system. In the beginning, still in the 16th century, some of the Indians tried to free themselves through an alliance with France that was known in the Brazilian history as the Tamoios, that's the name of the group, Confederacy. But this kind of initiative by the Indians did not work, because they were imprisoned again in this excluding system by the acts of 1862 in the 19th century. By the act of the Emperor Dom Pedro II in 1850, in order to have a property, let's say, to plant or some land, you had to pay for it. So the Indians, they didn't have how to pay, they didn't have commerce, they didn't have money, and so they, at this time, although there were still vast areas of land in Brazil, they were legally excluded from the opportunity to obtain any kind of property in the land, on land. Agro-exporting model first enslaved the Indians, then it started to enslave also the Africans that were forced to came to Brazil. But this model fails more or less around 1930 also by lack of working force, labor force. In 1930 it started the second model, that was a model followed by an industrialization, so that many factories, many enterprises were brought to Brazil in order to profit from the cheap labor that they found here. And this caused what is called in Brazilian history the rural exodus, or the migration, the migration to the big cities in Brazil, so that the peasants that were poor in rural areas became poor in the cities, became poor workers in the cities, and they remained excluded. They started living in this, let's say, in this philanthropic, sometimes it's philanthropic service like the Salvation Army or anything like that. But anyway, they remained also excluded from the benefits of the production system. The industrialization of Brazil brought also this industrialization of the agricultural production, its mechanization, and it brought also as a negative consequence what is called the rural credit, let's say the rural financing system that caused greater indebtedness of the peasants with negative consequences to them. This period is also known in Brazilian history as the Green Expansion, the Green Revolution, because it really expanded the agricultural production, but due to a great developing of the biotechnological technique, the biochemical technique, the biochemical presence in the agro production, with also some problematic consequences to the peasants and to agricultural in Brazil. This is what we call agribusiness. Well, the globalization brought or intensified the contradiction, because some workers, or one worker produces one machine, a new technology, and that means that 10,000 or thousands of workers will lose their jobs, will lose their way of living. We are not against technology, but we think that technology must fulfill the aim of fostering human life, not being against it, so that everybody can profit of this technological conquests. The problem here with this is that this benefits only a few. They get every benefit from this few landowners, few agro-business administrators, and the majority, millions of people, remain in misery. The third model was the neoliberal model. He was put in place by President Collor during his short term as a president, then by Itamar Franco, and then by Fernando Henrique Cardoso. It intensified the proximity between the Brazilian administration and the big international financial capital. It denationalized, it provoked a loss of control and the penetration of multinationals in the agro-business, in the Brazilian agro-business, with bad consequences for the Brazilian agriculture in the way that Brazil lost control on its production. It favored big companies like Monsanto, like DuPont, like the other one, Cargill also, and that they did not bring no new benefits to the peasants or the Brazilian people. The MST looked for inspiration in the old communities, like the Indian communities, like Canudos, like the Contestado, in order to build, let's say, an ethics of survival, of a decent survival, not to get rich, not to make harm to no one, but just survive in a decent way. Eu acho bom deixar um tempo para perguntas para eles. Tá bom.
Nós criamos o que nós chamamos de comuna.
Restart a sort of community life so that people that were in the rural exodus, they went into the cities where really they disorganized their way of living. They lost jobs, they have a life of poverty and misery. They can, they can turn the wheel the other way around. Return to the rural areas and start a new way of life based on old models, old community models, but renewed by everything that we are able to do in the present days. Well, he started saying that here in the MST there are no movie stars. So that really what counts is the base assemblies. The movement has, a vertical organization. There is a national coordination. It's organized through what they call the coordinations. There is a national coordination, there is a regional coordination, there is a family coordination, and there is a camp coordination, so that these decisions, you saw it. We came here, we had this problem, well, that they were in a base assembly, in a floor assembly, so they had to call someone from the coordination to authorize that we could come in. That's how it works.
Isso quer dizer que o João Pedro Stead, ele teve...
The MST has a very strong organization. It's one of the best organized movements in Latin America. And now he said that, for instance, João Pedro Stead, that belongs to the national coordination. He belongs to the national coordination. He's one of the founding fathers of the movement, let's say. He's an economist. He has managed to go to the university and so on, but that does not mean that he will feel that he is better or he is higher or he is in a different position than him, for instance, Trindade, that is working here at the basis of the movement. The philosophy of the MST is really participatory. Old men, women, everybody anyway has its place in the movement.
In the second
Educação de jovens e adultos.
Educação de jovens e adultos. Well, he says that the MST, of course, praises very much education. They have the EJA, that means educação, education, jovens for young people, and adultos, adults, education for young and adults, EJA. Okay, and so this EJA provides education for everybody. It's a real necessity towards the MST people, because generally peasants have had historically no access to education. They count also with help from many institutions in Brazil and even from abroad, and they have schools, and now even here in the São Paulo region, in São Paulo state, there is a faculty, not faculty, I mean a university level course for the MST that is being organized.